Hi, and welcome to Adobe Live. I'm your host, Christine Arth, and I'm here with Sunny Park.
Hi, everyone.
We'll be focusing on editorial design this week, and Sunny is here from New York City, and she's going to look through a lot of amazing work that we're doing, as well as the project that she's focusing on, which is...
I'm working on a magazine called Art Papers right now, and I thought, why not just take one of the essays and like some image content and just sort of, show you how, what inspired me and what my design process is like.
Amazing. Before we jump into that, I want to go through a little bit of your work on Behance because you have some amazing projects that I'd love to look at. Let's get full screen. Perfect. Okay, cool. So where do you want to start?
Right. So I guess I just want to maybe talk about myself a little bit. I sort of walked down this graphic design path. So I studied graphic design and BA, MFA. I guess it's always been my passion in a way. And I really love, anything to do with language, like typography and anything that sort of inspire me, sort of like, verbally, like, I get inspiration from words, like here, and I was like, oh, here. There was like a club night called Here, and what if we sort of verbalize that and like visualize what here really feels like and sounds like. And I get inspired by, sounds and how words sounds, but also, any sort of verbal cues or any visual cues. I'm very sort of visual, so I sort of look at something, I'm like, oh, this is interesting.
Yeah.
What if I kind of print that, and then rescan that and then print it again. I have very sort of organic process of working.
No, I love it.
Anything that speaks to me, I will just kind of like take it and like take it all the way.
A lot of interesting textures too, I'm noticing as we walk through some of these projects. What's the story behind these kind of cuts and watercolor?
Right. So this Open Studios is sort of this annual weekend event where all the prospective students come and find out, about the programs that Yale offers. So basically, it's called Open Studios, and I like the idea of like, something, sort of like how do I create this anticipation and this, this feeling of looking, something happening and something sort of about to happen, and how do I sort of visualize that? And I thought of using sort of paper cut or paper tearing of a paper as a sort of visual motive to sort of, that's the branded element to sort of signify, something's about to happen and something's about to open and something's about to really sort of go down and can't find out. So
like
that
something's going down at Yale. I love it. Well, welcome everybody. Hi, chat. We've got a really great show today with Sunny Park. And for those of you who are just tuning in now, we'll be focusing on editorial design, first with Sunny Park from 9 to 11. And then at 11, we'll have Marta Caro on with Kathleen Martin. 1 p.m. it'll be Puya Amadi. And then 3 p.m. Alma Kamal. So stick with us all day because it's going to be a great show. And speaking of a great show, we had an amazing winner yesterday for one of our challenges. Yesterday, the challenge was to design a business card using the new Typekit fonts that are included in your Creative Cloud subscription. And the winner yesterday was Christoph Van Proen. So we can actually take a look at the winning on my screen, the winner's work. He did a great job with the KVP, and the business card was really well done. So look to today's challenge to see what you can do to enter, which is designing a typographic poster and using the Typekit fonts again. So you're going to create a logo/poster, and there's a template that you can download in order to help you get off on that in that direction. So so check it out. We've got a lot of fun stuff. It'll be pretty cool.
Yay.
So cool. So should we jump into the magazine today?
Sure, absolutely.
Cool.
Let's do it.
All right.
So just to recap where we were.
Yeah.
Let's quickly go through the mood board. We sort of, I'm taking inspirations from port cities, where exchange of goods happen, exchange of ideas happen. And, how do I sort of visualize this idea of, constant flux of things happening and fluidity of not only ideas, but fluidity of water. So, I'm trying to sort of bring that idea of fluidity through the use of grid and sort of very flexible typographic movement.
Yeah, yesterday was so fun. I think Chat was super involved with picking out colors and asking questions. So keep it up, Chat.
Right. So yesterday I worked with one of the essays, and I thought today why not sort of work with a different content, which is the interview, one of the interviews.
Oh, cool.
So here's my interview. So one thing I wanted to do today is just go through and refine what I've done yesterday, and that's sort of a natural design process.
Totally,
I
looking
love
back.
to exactly I love to sit with it and then sleep on it, and then just make sure that something feels right.
Totally.
And then sometimes I go back to what I've done yesterday, and I'm like, oh,
You're like, I don't know if I like that, or that was really good. Let's do more.
exactly. And
Totally.
It's always sort of this interesting, exchange of this thoughts in your head, like,
Yeah.
oh, is this too much, or is this not, too simple?
Exactly.
So I'm going to be refining what I've done yesterday. I'm using one of the features, and today I'm going to add one of the sort of interviews to show you how I like to set interviews and different type of content.
Awesome.
So first, I think I'm going to add some pages. I anticipated this publication to be a 16-pager.
Ooh,
but
that's good.
I think I'm going to go up to 24 and see what happens today.
Nice. So maybe could you talk a little bit about pagination when you're doing this? Because I know you're doing a stitch-bound book, and there's possibly some people watching that have never actually done a book before.
Right, absolutely. So basically, first you want to know when you design a book, you want to know what type of binding you want to work with. So, there are multiple binding techniques, maybe you want to do a perfect bound, meaning it's glued. So you're not limited to any number of pages.
Yeah.
Whereas if you go down, it's more expensive, but if you want a proper bookish feeling, then you might want to think about thread sewn binding, meaning you see a bit of thread coming out,
and
and
the
it's
detail
beautiful.
is really nice. Yeah.
And the process of that, and then usually what happens is you work with the what we call a signature, and a signature is usually how a big sheet of paper is folded down into 16 pages, and it's all trimmed and it's all sort of bound. So usually you want to work with signatures. So you might want to have 4 signatures, meaning
Right.
16 by 4, 64 pages.
Got it.
But sometimes you could use a half signature, meaning, instead of 16, you want to go down to 8. It's slightly more costly, but, if you just feel you don't have enough content, so you might want to go down the page numbers, so then you can work with multiples of 8.
Got it.
But if that's not the case, and if you can't afford to thread sew your book, then it's obviously perfect binding is one of the options, and that you really are not limited to any number of pages. You can use from 4 pages to 12 to 7. Yeah.
247.
Yeah.
Odd numbers. It's okay. Yeah.
So right now, obviously, I'm not going to thread sew, I'm not going with the thread sewn binding for this book. I think I want to sort of use one of the print on demand services to print this. So I'm probably going to perfect bound this book. So I'm going to stick with multiples of 4 or 2s. So right now I'm at 24.
Cool.
So okay, here we are. So today I'm going to take this interview. The talk, it's an interview by Carson Chan, which is the guest editor of this issue of magazine, and the Bjarke Ingels. So what I'm going to do this time, yesterday I copied paragraph by paragraph, but today I'm just going to select the whole text and see what happens. So
You're let's just see. Today's about experimentation. This is good.
Yay. Okay, so I'm going to probably have like a title page, meaning I'm going to sort of have either images or texture to divide the feature and the interview, those two sections of my publication. So here I'm going to skip the spread, and I'm going to go ahead and make a little text box. And I think I'm going to use the smaller body font that I created yesterday, and I'm going to go ahead and paste this whole thing. All right, so one thing I wanted to show you is how easy, we spent so much time yesterday creating paragraph styles, and I kind of wanted to show you like benefits of doing that today by sort of making some like font changes.
Exactly, yeah. Oh, I loved that. It was interesting to see that you don't always have to do a specific font with a style, and that way you can change it but keep the attributes of the style as you move along. It was a really good technique.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely want to spend time like really just setting everything up properly, and then, go back and fine tune.
Yeah.
So yesterday, I talked about Noe has grotesque. It's actually, I was using a different cut yesterday. It's actually a cut by commercial type. So I wanted to use monotype cut version today. So I'm
Cool.
going to load it up on my typekit. And I'm going to use the display font because it's actually slightly thinner than the text weight.
Nice.
And that's something that you want to be aware of, how big is your typeface and how thin does it feel or how bold does it feel. And you
Right.
kind of just have to be super intuitive on like, what it feels like on a page.
Yeah.
So right now I chose the Noe House Grotesque Display Pro on the typekit. And then you will see on here, body has now a little plus sign. So I'm going to go ahead and refine style, meaning, any styles that uses bodies, paragraph styles, have been updated to Noe House Grotesque using typekit.
Cool. Yeah, and for those of you following along, Typekit now, with your Creative Cloud subscription, you can download and use over 600 fonts, which is insane. And also the new plugin allows you to see the fonts and click them on and off within Typekit inside the program. So you don't have to go outside of the program in order to activate them, which is a huge time saver.
Absolutely. So I want to show you, so this is now set in body typeface and font and sizes, but I want to really play with indentation today. So
Ooh, fun.
let's set that up. So I'm going to make a new paragraph style while I have my cursor in that text box, and let's call it body interviewer. And then
Love
there
it.
will be interviewee.
Ooh.
So it's based on body.
Yeah. You're like, it's the body interviewer. I always love the random names that, like, if you take them out of context, they're pretty funny.
Exactly. It's kind of
It's
like,
great.
oh, does it? Sometimes I'm like, oh, does it sound right?
It's always right.
Yeah. I'm going to click through and make sure I have everything set up correctly. Okay, so indents and spacing. So,
Nice.
first indent, left indent. I'm going to do left indent about, let's just sort of play around with it, but 60 mil.
I also like that you guys can't see, but Sunny has notes, and I'm like, that's so great, just because it means you're real Sunny.
Yay! That's
Well,
so
we all
funny.
like write down notes about it's very specific measurements, and
Oh,
you
yeah,
need to remember.
absolutely.
So, and as designers, numbers don't always come easy to remember.
Yeah, I mean, I love numbers and making sure everything,
Yeah.
fits and it's all mathematical. And, feel free to just, have fun with it, you know?
But it's also great to like set some rules and then be able to break them. We were talking about that yesterday with Puya. He's like, I have all these rules and then I'm going to break them.
Yeah.
I was like, oh wow, this is so cool.
Right. No, it's really just kind of what feels right. And then it's, you just get to experiment. And that's
Yeah.
the beauty of, sort of using a software like this that gives you all these sort of functions to play around with.
Totally.
So I made a style called body interviewee this time. And instead of left indent, I'm going to give a right indent.
Nice.
All right. So now you will see that, the Bjork England Ingels is now, right indented, and then the interviewer is left indented. So I'm really going to play with, this type of left and right indentation going on today.
Yeah.
So you will see, and that's sort of...
that flow of water.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's really what I'm going for. And, it's sort of... maybe it just kind of feels too crazy, and that's okay. You can come back.
Yeah. And maybe the craziness is good.
Yeah. And I want to go back into sort of, really details of typography, I'm sure people have heard of sort of widows and orphans and what they are, and sort of like my preference, of like how to rag something or how to get rid of a widow and orphan.
Totally. This is
so
great.
That's what I'm going to sort of get into today.
And chat, if you guys have questions for Sunny, feel free to post them and we will get them to her so that she can answer them while she's working live.
Hey.
And also we have the Chat and Win countdown, which is going to go on in about 15 minutes. We have a really great oversized AI sticker and an AI pin. So if you're an Illustrator fan, which I know I am, you can win these if you chat and win. So stick with us in 15 minutes and you'll see fireworks, and that's when you have to chat.
Awesome. All right, so I'm gonna actually take out the title of this interview and I'm going to sort of place it here. So, I'm gonna just kind of pull that out here, knowing I'm going to have to style it like a title page.
Cool.
So there we go. So that you can see already, this sort of part of the book is going to be sort of very rigid, and as opposed to something that we were doing yesterday, it was just sort of free fall and, very fluid. So I think that's something that I look for, a constant surprise, which is what I talked about. And I don't want to bore anyone by sort of making the same moves all the time.
Totally.
And, so, as right now, speaking of boredom, let's see what images I can put in.
You're like, I want imagery. Although it was really cool that you were showing the pages with the black background to separate it, almost like a presentation mode. What's the key command for that?
Right, that's the W. If you hit W, it's the preview mode, and then if you hit Shift W, that's a full presentation mode.
See, tricks of the trade. That's great, because then you can just like get back into it when you need to immediately.
Exactly. And then you can actually hit like W to, make the background white.
Nice.
It's sort of like, personal preference. I prefer black,
Totally. It just makes
better.
it stand out, especially when it's white pages. Yeah.
Exactly. So I want to use sort of image as a device to divide between different essays. So I was perhaps going to make this a little full bleed. And, actually, I like the idea of sort of, running the image size as they are. So it doesn't have to be, sort of like full bleed or anything. There's a bit of white space at the bottom, and, that's fine. And I kind of want to embrace this sort of white space around the images today. So actually, I quite like the way that that's looking. So I'm just going to make it slightly smaller. And then I'm going to place another image in there.
Well, you've got a nice hello from Peng. Peng says hello. This is
hi,
awesome stuff.
So You're good to hear from you.
Nice. It's always fun when friends show up.
Oh, absolutely. I love it. So this is sort of like the image grid I'm sort of going to play with today. So
cool.
I like the idea of everything sort of stacked against the top, and then just sort of making it feel like it's, sort of resting against the land or resting against the seashore. So this is sort of the layout, the image layout that I'm going to play with today.
Very fun.
So, yeah, I'm going to be very sort of more calm and more refined because I was kind of crazy yesterday trying to.
I loved it. I thought that was great. Yeah.
So here I'm just really playing with the texture and color. And when you choose images, you want to make sure that they, work next to each other, work together really well. So, pay attention to the, type of color scheme that it's in. There's a lots of green in this page. There's lots of brown and reddish brown in this image. And, I kind of want to like maybe break out of that color palette and then maybe place something a little bit, that brightens up the whole page. And you will see already
Nice.
how this page is certainly, sort of brightened up already. And that's...
Hi, Ashi. Welcome.
Hi,
Thanks for joining us.
everyone.
Yes.
So this is sort of the look that I wanna, I like the way they all stack together and then they're feeling on the spread. So I kind of want to sort of see what happens, if I carry that on throughout this interview section. So
Cool.
I'm going to go ahead and I place a few more images.
Hi, Abir. We're just going to say a lot of hellos, I have a feeling. Everyone's going to say hello, and they all want to say hello to you, Sunny.
Oh, yay.
Hi, Cindy.
Glad you could join us today.
Yeah.
So here we go. So something that
Oh,
flows.
yeah.
And then, I think today I was just thinking, like, what if we divide the publication into half? And then the image can just flow at the top, and then maybe the text flows at the bottom.
Totally.
And that's like a really fun way. Sometimes, people use that for bilingual text. So, maybe the top is like in French and the bottom is in English. And so you can sort of start to think about how you can divide up the spread or publication in a way that you can sort of organize your information in a functional way. So...
Hi, Nathaniel. Hi, Nazar. Hi, Jordan.
Glad you could join
Hi, Eric.
us.
Hey, Tim Mo Beast. He's
love
the Mo
that.
Best.
So today I'm going to bring this texture down here, and then I'm going to overlay that to the title page. There you go. And yesterday we talked a lot about the color of water. And I think I kind of want to pull back and maybe use the color a little bit more meaningful way. Meaning right now, sort of let's go back to what we were doing yesterday. There's a lot of green and pink going on and they feel very, very random right now. And I think I want to sort of apply some sort of logic or system to the way I use color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make all this text black. Sorry, pink.
Sorry, Pink. You're out. Black is in. I love that you're apologizing to Pink.
I know. I think there are a lot
I'm
of people
sorry,
wanting to
Pink.
see pink yesterday. Sorry, everyone. It's going to come back, don't worry.
Yeah, totally.
So you can see instantly how sort of the spread just feels more calmer. And I just kind of like that. So I'm going to keep it all black and white.
Like, it makes me feel
with a hint
better.
of color.
It's all personal. I love it.
Yeah. And the way I'm going to bring that pink gradient color is actually through the pull-out quotes.
Nice.
So when you read like a magazine or a newspaper, there's always some sort of little, paragraph or little sentences that's pulled out of the main text. So that's what we call pull-out quote. And you can really have fun with it. It could be set in a different style, different fonts, different weight. So I'm going to sort of copy something here. Actually, let's just sort of go down and copy something. There you go.
Hi, Christoph. Welcome and congratulations on your win yesterday.
Ooh, congrats.
I think, did he change his avatar to his winning card? That's pretty cool.
That's very
Yeah,
smart.
that's awesome. Smart. Now we
Yeah.
recognize you.
I'm
We're like,
the
oh,
winner.
KVP.
Yeah. So you will see I used a pretty big size font for the pull-out quotes. Oh, that's a lot of
You're like, that's a big
text.
quote.
So let's see. I'm going to just quickly make that a shorter pull-out quote.
You're like, Björk Ingels didn't need to say that much.
And then obviously sort of rule of hyphenation that I like to think of it, like you don't want to hyphenate words with like 2 letter or like very short, you don't want to hyphenate a very short word basically. So I'm going to break the line after that. There's sort of FI hyphenation. So this is our pull-out quote.
Cool.
And the way I'm going to bring color is make that sort of pull-out quote, that little gradient color that we made yesterday.
Oh, fun. Yeah.
So this way, it's pretty clear that, this pull-out quote is not part of the main text, but it's just there to sort of give you, you got to think about different types of readers, basically. So some people like to go in and read everything really, really in detail, but some people like to flip through the books and read something really slowly, really quickly. So you want to be thinking about, all different types of readers.
Yeah, I'm the pull-out quote reader.
Yeah.
I'm like, got it. They were on a boat. Okay, next page.
Exactly.
Where's the visual? Alice says hello from Thailand.
Oh, hi.
She's like, hi, Sunny.
Yay. So I used to live in Thailand, so I have a special, Thailand has a special
Place in your
place
heart?
in my
Yeah.
heart. I love cooking Thai foods.
Oh, nice.
Yay. So, all right. So I'm going to go ahead and clean up this sort of layout a little bit more. And, I want to sort of make sure that everything reads well today, and want to make sure that it doesn't feel too crazy and sort of alienate the readers from wanting to like really find out about what the text is saying. So, this, earlier this sort of footnotes was in part of the main text, and I think that's just really distracting. So I'm going to make this into a 5-column footnotes.
I love it because we've got columns. I mean, we can change columns at any moment.
Exactly.
Is it 10 or 12 column we're working with?
12.
Yes.
Yes.
Who out there likes 12 columns?
It's the beauty. So yesterday I made this footnote paragraph style with the rule above every paragraph break. So I'm gonna bring that back on.
Cool. Yeah.
And then one thing I wanna sort of bring attention to is the way the all these hyphens are sitting inside the text box. But really you wanna use this optical margin function, which is hiding from me.
A lot of people out there that like this 12 column grid.
Oh,
yep.
nice.
Eric, Kelsey, Ashi, Fabiano, they're all like, we love it. We're learning so much.
Yay. Yeah, I'm glad that this is useful. I'm just talking
Oh
out
no,
loud.
the spinning ball of death.
Oh no, never mind. The
And
help
we were just
does
talking
not
about
like
that
me.
this morning. I was like, no.
Okay, so here we go, optical margin alignment. So I'm going to go ahead and select the text box and then click on the optical margin alignment. So all these hyphenations or punctuations like, double quotation marks or quotation marks are all going to sit outside the text box.
Oh,
And that's sort of the, sort of what you want to be doing so it doesn't create a weird alignment of the text. And usually the amount that I use is the size of the font. So we're using an 8-point size font. So I'm going to go ahead and update that to 8-point.
Very cool.
Yeah, so this is something, rule of thumb, typography, punctuation should sit outside the text box. So same idea here. This one is 21-point font we're working with. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that on.
Great.
So there we go. And one thing that you can really play with is the justification setting, and especially when you're, instead of working with the flush left alignment, when you're working with fully justified text, what we call, it creates a visual sort of river, and this sort of, you can see that, there's a lot of white space between the words going on, and you really want to avoid this river from happening. So the one way to do that is to go into your justification setting and then sort of see what feels right to you. So I'm gonna reduce the word spacing to something like 90, minimum 60. And there's no rule for this one. You can sort of plug in some numbers and see what's sort of starting to reduce the river effect that we're talking about. So I'm going to go ahead and okay that. So you can see already the word spacing is a little bit tighter. And then, I got to sort of somehow, got rid of all the hyphenation that was happening. So that's something that you really want to start paying attention to, and how many hyphenations that you have consecutively. And also there is a way to sort of adjust that. So if you go to hyphenation, you definitely don't want to hyphenate capitalized words. So meaning, any names or any sort of, capitalized words, you really don't want to break that. So I'm going to untick that. And you also don't want to hyphenate last word. So I'm going to untick that.
No, I love this.
And also after, I generally like to, break the words after 3 or 4 letters. So, it's the default is 2 letters, but I'm going to update that to 3. So that's our sort of, we're going to really talk about details of typography today.
I like the details. And in fact, you guys, details on the screen, we're going to have a chat and win in about 5 seconds. So
Ooh,
get
yay.
ready for it. We're like, oh yeah, it's happening. All right, guys. Now's the time. Wait for the fireworks. Chat and win.
Yay.
Go.
Oh, Eric, say hi.
All right, we're back. Yay. Did you guys chat? Because someone's going to win. I know you saw someone you knew out there, too. You were like, oh, hey.
I saw that Eric Sue was back, and I wanted to say hi, and for everyone who's back today, thank you.
Nice. All right, I feel like you guys are chatting a lot. We've got these pins and stickers. Someone's going to win.
Who's going to be?
Maybe I'll just wear the pin and we'll put the sticker here. Am I the winner?
The winner is...
The winner is...
me! Still got it.
Oh, we got it!
Fanny Escobar!
Nice!
Congrats!
Congrats, Fanny! Nice job.
That was
These
awesome.
are yours, not ours. We'll send them to you.
That's so cute. I love those like pillows that
Oh,
I
I do
see
too.
here
Yeah.
too.
Good job, Fanny. Way to chat and win.
All right. So back to the layout. So I'm going to...
I love this. Now back to work, everybody.
No time to chat and win
No.
anymore. Back to the business. All right. So I really sort of played around with the font sizes yesterday. I'm having second thoughts about them. So
I love this.
let's go back to
Like I'm
what
having
it
second
was.
thoughts about these font sizes.
And that's okay. And, there's a
Totally.
beauty in going back and forth between, all these sort of ideas that you have in mind. And sometimes they're not all going to work. And that's like
Yeah.
part of the process that I like to think, it's the part of like editing.
Totally.
So,
Yeah, you're self-editing, which is
exactly.
the hardest part for a designer to do, I think.
Exactly. So I'm going to sort of clean up and, I'm going to take this, pink out because like we decided that the pink gradient is going to be applied to pull-out quotes.
Love it.
So I'm going to come down. And then also this, this is like a very interrupted reading experience because, essentially you're not going to read a, good part of the sentence. It's all going to hide in your spine.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to get rid of this move. Yay!
You're like, I'm doing it. I'm doing whatever I want. I'm excited.
I know. Just that's just like all I do. I just try a bunch of things and I undo a bunch of things, and I come back to it and maybe redo a bunch of things.
I like the process. It's really organic.
Absolutely. So here, I'm starting to think that maybe the interview, I want to sort of start to introduce a different voice. So I like the idea of bringing a bit of like human touch to it. So I'm going to maybe try a different font. So I'm going to introduce using Typekit. Plantain is one of the new fonts that got added onto Typekit.
Cool.
And the beauty of this beautiful serif is that it has a very large X height, meaning it's very legible and it's very sort of practical, meaning you can use it at a very small size.
Totally.
And it's going to print really well. So I'm going to go ahead and set the interview in all the serif
Nice.
fonts, which is the Plantain. So I'm going to go ahead and refine style.
Nice. See, that's the beauty of having all those styles you already created.
Exactly. I couldn't emphasize that enough. So there you go. So that's your interview, and I'm going to just sort of run the text box so we can start to fill more pages. So there you go.
Nice.
So yeah, today is going to be very calm. I can feel it.
Very calm.
Yeah.
I think it's already wild. I like it.
Okay, so the interviewee, I'm going to apply plantain. I'm going to refine the style as well. And there you go. Okay.
So for those of you out there who are just joining us, we're here with Sunny Park, and she's working on an editorial design that is focused on ports, water, and the beauty of traveling across the sea.
Yay. Thank you. That was beautiful.
Thank you. That's what I'm here for. I support. And don't forget, guys, if you see on the challenge submission, the deadline's an hour. So you have a full hour to create a poster using any of the type kit fonts that are available for you. More of a typographic poster. And there's a template that you can download if you're unsure of how to go about it. So it's pretty self-explanatory. It's great. I'm really excited to see everybody's submissions, and the best part is that Sunny will get to do some constructive criticism on all of them. So
Get ready.
Yeah, you're like, it's gonna happen.
So one thing I wanted to show today is how I like to use character styles. So yesterday I made all these paragraph styles, and I mentioned that character styles really for details like, italicizing something, or making something all caps. So all these sort of details should be all done by character styles. So I kind of want to make all the names sort of back into the sans serif. So there we go. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new character style called sans.
Cool.
And there you go. You can see Neuhaus Display Pro, and it's going to be Roman. It's a 55 Roman. There we go. So now you can see that every time I highlight something within this paragraph and then apply sans, and it sort of updates the font style. And this way, maybe I change my mind and then I maybe want to make them back into serif, and that's, so easy to do that, make that change. So, and a few tricks, one of my favorite functions in InDesign is find and replace.
Oh, I love that, yeah. It's so satisfying.
So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So basically, every time the CC is mentioned has a little colon and a space. And I really sort of don't want to manually update that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight the whole thing and place here.
Nice.
And then I'm going to change them to CC and then M space. And then basically you can just say the story, meaning this whole text box, and I'm going to change all.
Ooh.
Yay.
That's cool.
And then once again, I'm gonna do the same thing to the BI. Fine. And then there's a BI colon and a space. So this whole selection is now going to be updated to BI and an M space.
Nice.
So that's sort of like my favorite thing to do. And sometimes I go, I do it manually too. Like I said, I love to be sort of more in control of what I'm doing. But things like this is just so easy to just find in place, and it's just such a lifesaver.
And there's a lot of instances too, so it would take a while to find them all.
So I'm going to go ahead and make this line in. So I'm going to update, start to add guides to our master. So I'm going to copy this guide that I already have, and I'm going to place it in my master. So this way, every page now you will see that little guide, and then that's, my sort of cue to break the interview section.
Nice.
So I'm gonna go ahead and align it.
Oh, looks like we've got some viewers from Germany. Guten Abend. Yes,
Oh.
Jürgen. Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Where's everybody tuning in from? I'm curious.
Yeah,
I was like, I see Germany.
absolutely. And, I love that it's people from all over the world.
I know.
Yay. Okay, so I'm actually gonna go ahead and make this guide a small change of the guide.
Ooh,
So
Alaska.
Oh, wow.
Toronto, Cape Town, South Africa, Iowa, Wisconsin, Estonia, Brussels, Missouri. Wow, the UK.
Awesome. All right, so that's my guide. I'm gonna sort of place it half of the page.
Nice.
Yeah, so you can see sort of, how this part of the publication is going to work. It's really a conversation between, what I like to think of as sort of the way, how the ports work. So it's sort of how the land meets with the water, or there's sort of, that sort of interesting contrast between textures. So that's what I'm trying to create using the image and the text today. So imagine the image, portion is the land, and then the text portion is the sea, maybe. And I can just sort of bring different movement and different sort of alignment happening.
Yeah, you can really see the juxtaposition between the two coming alive with the text and image. It's great.
Yeah, so I'm going to make sure.
And the images are really cool.
Yeah.
I feel like they're not the average perspective of what you would see,
Absolutely.
So it's like, oh, the inside of the boat from this angle. And it's like, interesting.
I think one thing I'm just looking at my images and realizing is that like sort of the sequencing of the images, you can really tell a different story through the way you sequence your book, but also the way you sequence your images. So I think I'm going to tell a story by sequencing the images in an interesting way. So what I'm going to do is I was like, why not make the images sort of depart? So it's sort of like take, departure from land and then show the journey throughout. So I'm going to make sure the way the images are working is chronological. So think about the way that you're by the harbor. So I'm going to sort of, introduce this distance that's sort of zoomed out.
Yeah.
And I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to zoom out again. So we're by the harbor. And then I'm going to get on the boat.
I love it. You're like, I'm creating this story of my journey through image. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can really sort of tell a story in different ways and, think
Completely.
about time of the day, and maybe you get inspired by different temperature of light, or you can really sequence the images in like however you want, and, as long as they all work together.
Yeah. Well, something you had mentioned yesterday, which I thought was interesting, the difference between editorial and like just poster design or general design is that you're using someone else's photographs. So, I mean, for designing in general, a lot of times you treat the photos and manipulate them to work with your idea, but with editorial, you're using their raw photos.
Exactly.
And you were talking a little bit about, manipulating or putting something over it and how you need to ask for permission. And can you talk a little bit more about that? Because it's interesting to know that you're with these images and that's it. That's all you've got.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, basically, I worked at some, museums before, and then they really care about how the artwork is cropped. And it really is just to way that, you want to make sure that you represent everyone's work as purely as intended as possible. So, you can sort of, the cropping is a very big part of, in anyone's work. You plan out how you want people to see the images or how people to see the colors all together. So, you can see in my layout, imagine I made this horizontal image into a vertical, and you suddenly feel like, it becomes a different image.
Right.
So, as much as you like to take full control of what you're doing and how you want to sort of represent your work, you kind of have to be super respectful about how you represent other people's work, and just trying to sort of present everyone's work as sort of naturally as intended as possible. So that's sort of like, a little bit of cropping is fine, but you just sort of want to, call it out and be like, look, I cropped this image. Is that okay?
Yeah, I found it to be a really good reminder of the difference between when you're doing editorial versus graphic design. It's all design, but it's a specific type of appreciation for the work that you're representing, which I thought it was great that you had mentioned that yesterday.
Yeah, it's something that I always think about, and then, you wouldn't want to, sort of submit your poster like today you will be
Right,
doing.
yeah, you can do whatever you want with a poster because it's expected. But when you're representing a photographer and someone's words, then
Yeah, you definitely want to think about how they're being viewed.
Totally.
And, what scale. And something that to think about is the scale of the images too, and something that comes up a lot when I'm like designing a book. For example, let's say this photograph was someone else's work. So, maybe I'm just going to place a completely different image. And some people get really offended by how tiny their images are.
Yeah.
And then you somehow...
You're like, don't worry, I'm going to think about you too, but on page 12.
Yeah. So when you're sort of, thinking about image size and how they're going to be placed in your book, you sort of want to make sure that you sort of treat everyone equally.
Totally. Which is hard in editorial because it's about your layout too.
Exactly.
Like that's your design, It's so interesting. There's so many like different pieces of like art going on in the same place.
Absolutely.
It's a lot to juggle.
Yeah. And it's a sort of a good idea to, ask for as much content. Like you want to sort of see what kind of material you're working with. So, you want to make sure also all the images are feeling sort of similar. And you don't want to have some, a set of images that are all black and white, and then suddenly they're all in, sort of red. So you kind of want to think about how some work is documented and how that work is going to be printed and how they're going to feel together as a set.
Amazing.
So I always think about, these sort of images as, taken by the same camera in a same place. So they're all going to sort of feel very similar. But I also think about, imagine you use like a, black and white film camera and that the sort of, it's going to have a very different definition, different resolution. So those are the details that you really want to think about, the documentation of the work. So luckily I didn't have to worry about that.
Right, but it's coming together in a way that you can tell. And I think it was just nice to explain to the audience like the thought process of some of these images and how you're actually piecing them together. That's cool.
Yeah, thank you. So this is sort of what my interview section is going to feel like. And it's, you can see that they feel very different. And, it's okay to sort of bring a different layout strategies for different types of, content. So this is an interview, so I'm going to set it in a specific way. And then this is the feature, so I'm going to set this in a specific way. And that's, how you can sort of bring variety throughout the whole book. And that's something that I always think about. Like, am I repeating the same moves all the time? Or am I sort of not repeating enough moves?
Right. The balance, again. It's all about balance.
Exactly. So, I wanted to sort of like talk about that today and how everything's going to feel, very sort of disjointed, but maybe as a whole, they're going to start to feel really nice.
I think Dior had a question about bleeds. It was just the word bleeds, but I have a feeling that the question behind that word is, how do you handle bleeds? Do you think that you're going to handle it like after? Because it seems like, you want to lay everything out first, and then if it works, then pay attention.
Absolutely. So that also goes back to the way you're going to print your book. So for example, if you're making a newsprint zine or something, then, a lot of sort of newsprints you can't print full bleed.
Right.
So then you have to go back to the printer and think about, so what's my margin? What are we talking about? What's the print safe area? And then you want to place the images and all your content within that margin. So I think this print on demand service that I'm thinking of doing, they definitely print full bleed.
Nice.
So I made like a 3 mil, bleed. So everything is sort of placed within that bleed. So you can see this image is running all the way down to my bleed zone. And something that I always sort of make sure that everything's like pixel perfect.
I love it. Even with that bitmap, it's like amazing.
So, that's sort of like my footnotes and my, sort of like the feature content. They're all sort of like talking to each other. And I realized that like there are weird indents happening. So I'm going to take this all out. So, like I said, today is all going to be about refinement.
I love it.
So,
and tomorrow's going to be about crazy again.
Yeah, exactly.
It's true, though. It's the balance.
Exactly. Exactly.
I think they should just call it balanced design instead of editorial because there's so many
Editorial.
things that you're juggling.
Absolutely. I'm curious if people have any more questions
Yeah.
too. It really, you have to think about, what are you designing? What's the paper you're using?
Totally.
What's the printer you're using? So everything's sort of somehow like, come together. And that's the, beauty of working together with a team of talented people. You really want to make sure that you're talking to them and then you're sort of communicating your limitations and your sort of restrictions, basically.
Totally.
So
Yeah, chat. Do you guys have any questions for Sunny about process or what she does or questions that you go through and are curious about when you're doing editorial design?
hey, so what I'm really doing is like revisiting what I've done and really just refining and, going back to this idea of sort of orphan and widows. So orphan and widows are sort of, I'm going to talk about them like as a like sort of set of same things. So you basically don't want to have a word or a very short sentence at the end or at the beginning of a paragraph. So that, it doesn't just mean, people sort of think that's like, oh, just one word last line, but it actually is just like a very short word or short sentence as your last line or the first line. So the way I make sure they don't happen is, for example, I'm working with a very large indent, so it's visually creating a very disturbing white space around these two two lines.
That's a great tangent. Thanks, Fish Story.
So I'm going to work with the indent. So maybe the indent's just too much. So I'm going to reduce them to something like 8. So you can sort of tuck things in.
Nice.
And you have to make sure that everything flows really nicely and there's no any sort of interruption between paragraphs. So, things like that.
So Keen has a question. How do you decide on what typeface to use?
Right. So yesterday I sort of talked about typeface as personality. So when you're working with a text, I like to just take a quick read and think about, what kind of voice do I want to give to this text. So maybe you're working with like a comic artist and the tone of the text is very lighthearted and humorous. Then then there are different ways to represent that voice. Maybe you want to represent that through a very comical font. Or maybe you want to give a bit of contrast. So maybe you want to represent that voice through a very authoritative and serious font. So I like to think about it as how much sort of continuity there is between the voice of the text and then the visual sort of language of the text. And sometimes I like to just completely sort of go against that and just surprise people.
Yeah.
And that's like
a very funny person with very serious text.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I find that really interesting. So that's sort of really what you want to be thinking about. And, like I said, this text is very serious, is very academic. So I decided to, and also, talking about cargo ships and all this idea of globalization. And it's a very, academic text. So I wanted to carry that weight through the voice. So I chose a very sort of almost very anonymous, very sort of serious font. I think I described it as industrial yesterday. But then I definitely want to give a little bit of contrast. So I'm going to maybe make the footnotes into the serif. So I'm going to make this into our beautiful plantain. There you go.
Nice.
And I'm going to refine that. So you kind of constantly want to be aware of how you're using your font. So maybe you applied serif to footnotes. And then serifs to some interview content.
Yeah.
And that's, sort of like, I like to think of them as like sort of setting up rules. So, serif is only used for certain context. And then the, sans serif is used for certain context. So that's sort of, you can create your own personal rules. And then obviously you can break them however you want.
I like it. Keen said thanks. Wow, thanks for the answer. Very inspiring.
Thank you.
Awesome. Great question, Keen.
Yeah, so what you've just seen me do is basically right now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 5 to 6 words per line. And I think that's just too short. Ideally, you want to have about 10 to 11 words per line. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back and make sure everything is, not too short and not too abrupt. And everything feels good on the page.
I think another question I saw from Jacob was, do you have any tips on pre-flighting, like if you're using special spot UVs or how you work with that?
Absolutely. So what I love to do is working with layers. So sometimes, the whole text and all the graphics goes on one layer. And let's say you want to print this whole block and apply varnish. So what I do is I create a new layer. And then I call out the sort of printing process. So maybe I'm using UV varnish.
Nice.
So I'll make a new layer, and I actually copy that onto. So I make that sort of.
Oh, like a duplicate?
Layer into, yeah, exactly.
Got it.
So I'm gonna copy and paste, and then I'm going to make that whole section sort of magenta or red. And I usually like to, of course, make sure that that this layer is red. So I'm going to make everything red. So you can use color in this pre-flight stage to really communicate with the printer. So now the printer knows, and then you have to communicate everything is sort of in multiple layers. So now you know that I'm going to be applying UV varnish on that specific area.
Oh, that's great. Hopefully that answered Jacob's question. Hi, Jacob.
Hi, Jacob. So yeah, I like to
Robert.
work with layers. I tell the printer like exactly what I want to do, and then I sort of like make notes.
You're like, I got a layer for this. Hold on, printer. I got a layer for this.
And one thing you want to sort of ask your printer is the color profiles. So, some printers have their own color profiles that they want you to use.
Right.
And so the best way to do that is once you're done designing. I'm going to maybe sort of talk about this later, but once you're done designing, I collect all the images that I used and then batch process them using Photoshop. So
nice.
Maybe the printer asked me to use a specific color profile that I'm going to convert all the images. Only the images that I use, obviously. You don't want to spend, so much time converting like hundreds and hundreds of images that you don't use. So what I like to do is I package the whole thing, and then I bring all the links into Photoshop and batch process them and apply like consistent color profile throughout.
Again, efficiency. I like this. Yeah. And then we have to do a little shout out. Hey, Vlad. Hi, Vlad.
Hi, Vlad. How are you? So yeah, I'm going to just go page by page and, see what feels odd. And this is a good sort of, like there's no orphans, there's no widows, everything is like very tucked in.
Nice.
So this one, it doesn't even sit on our
you're like this one's tucked in, no orphans, no widows. I'm like, yep, I see it.
So I'm going to force break some lines to make sure the widows and orphans don't occur.
Jacob said, thank you for the response. That was very helpful.
Yay.
And then Dior asked, how would you advise to improve composition skills?
Ooh.
That's a tough one.
That's a really tough
That's
one.
kind of like a watch this live feed. And hopefully...
Well, I like to think of it as balance. It's really funny because it all comes down to balance.
It does.
So, for example, I make sure everything doesn't feel so skewed, and I want to make sure everything on the page feel balanced. So what I mean by that is I always like to think of, imagine this text box was up here. And then imagine everything was top aligned. So maybe that's your concept, and everything's top aligned and everything sort of feels balanced and everything feels stable. But imagine you're doing something like off balance diagonal sort of composition where everything feels like it's about to sort of, fall off the page. So that's something I always try to pay attention to, and how it sort of does it feel stable enough? Does it feel like it's about to sort of, sort of fall off the page? Or, does it feel, stable and weighty and everything feels comfortable on the page? So
Balance.
It's all about balance.
I like that. It is all about balance.
Absolutely.
Pretty much in everything that we do.
Absolutely.
Except for eating ice cream. There's no balance there. Just go for it.
I actually wanted to maybe bring another font. So I'm going to go into Typekit and then sort of download some more fonts that I want to sort of start to bring in more. So what I'm looking for, I think, is maybe decorative. And I might not like it in the end, but I'm starting to think that all these title heads can be a little bit like sort of set, slightly differently.
Yeah.
So
I like this. You're like, I might not like it, but I need to know. It's like the curiosity,
Exactly.
I need to know.
And this is like, this is naturally what I do. And then there's sometimes like, oh, maybe I want to bring some more texture. And I just like browse a bunch of, fonts. And then I just sort of download them and then try them out. So I'm going to go ahead and download this very sort of magazine-y editorial display
it's
face.
Like a Dido-esque.
Absolutely.
Very beautiful.
Unfortunately, this font is web only. Sorry about that.
You're like, sorry guys.
Can't use that one.
Next time.
So maybe I'm gonna try using this one. There we go. I'm going to sync.
Ooh.
Yay. And I'm going to, yay. I'm going to apply that new font that I just downloaded.
So Justin has a question. Do you feel that you get diverse opportunities to do multiple things, like creating illustrations and photoshopping, or is it more of a team effort in editorial design?
My approach is to sort of make sure the whole process is collaborative. And I think the biggest fear that I have sometimes is like, am I just, sort of talking to myself,
Yeah. You're like, am I doing it all? Shoot.
Of course, I can sort of, there's our display font here, so I'm going to try, whoa.
We're like, ooh, look at that.
Yeah.
That's different.
I'm going to sort of like try that out and give it a bit of like a bitmap feel, like textured feel next to the bitmap. So going back to collaborative process, I mean, obviously, I can take pictures and obviously I can draw.
Right.
But I'm not, I don't want to sort of, have every sort of mark on every page. So I want to make sure that, every page is filled with different people's input and voices. So, right now I'm working with a photographic content that's not mine. Bitmap, it just feels completely different. And maybe there's some illustration that's done by your favorite illustrator, and then maybe you want to sort of have that, interesting conversation that happens on a page.
It's a good mix.
Absolutely. And I like to think of that as, a fun, like, collaborative process. You learn so much from, like, just working with other people. And that's sort of, like, literally what I could hope for, just learning through the whole process. Like, there's always something to be learned.
Totally.
And that's what I could hope for.
I feel like that word is described as balance.
Yeah.
It's the word of the day, guys. Balance.
And harmony.
Yeah,
the
collaboration.
World is beautiful, everyone.
Yeah, everyone. Kumbaya. It's true, though. It's really true.
Absolutely. So I forgot that I was applying this sans serif.
You're like, I was so balanced that I forgot what I was doing.
So I'm going to go ahead.
Way to go, Justin. Totally distracted Sunny with your awesome question. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's, such a beautiful sentiment. And that's sort of how I got into design as well. It's like I wanted to just work with other people.
Totally.
And I wanted to sort of learn from other people. And that's where this idea of peer learning comes from too.
Yeah, I really liked that you brought that up yesterday as like the major tip for kind of growing as a designer is peer learning.
Yeah.
And I don't think that ever ends. Like even like when you're really good and you think you've mastered something, there's still peer learning. You're like, oh, wait, how did you do that? I do it like this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, I have my way of doing it, but if it's different, that's all right too.
I feel like Adobe Live needs a follow-up show for like the overhead view of key commands of the whole show because like there's such interesting ways that everyone works where I'm like,
Absolutely.
oh, I'm like, how did you do that? Because I go to the menu to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, what I'm doing right now is I'm sort of making sure all the names that I set in the sans character style is all uppercase always. Cool. So all uppercase, and when you set something on all uppercase, you want to give a bit of like sort of white space around it. So I updated this tracking from 5 to 30.
Nice.
And so that, you just need more sort of white space around all uppercases like this. So that's what I've just done. So now it's feeling really good on the page and I'm really happy with this.
You're like, I like it again. It's a love-hate relationship of like, I love it. Oh, I don't know. Now I love it. So for those of you joining in, we are with Sunny Park right now, and she is mastering this editorial process for a beautiful layout that's consisting of interviews, amazing photography, and some balance of all of it.
I wonder if it's going to come up again later.
Yeah, I know, definitely. It's the word of the day. We've already decided.
Exactly. And okay, so this is sort of like what my interview is looking like. I'm going to go ahead and set everything using the character styles. And once again, you can, set up a shortcut. And really, instead of me clicking through, you can just apply shortcuts. But
nice.
Right now, I'm just going to click through.
Time-saving techniques by Sunny Park. I love these.
Yeah, everyone, welcome.
It's perfect. Yes, and don't forget to get your submissions in for the daily challenge. You have the chance to win a year subscription to Creative Cloud, which is pretty awesome considering it now includes thousands of fonts.
Yes, exactly. So there we go. So that's my interview section. So I've been thinking a lot about this color that I have going.
Yeah, tell us.
And once again, this idea of like making sure everything feels intentional and doesn't feel random. And, also sometimes what I like to think about is this like idea of duality. Yeah. And maybe there's one way to look at something, but there's another way of looking at something. And I was just thinking about how someone's going to look at this color and going to think, oh, that's a color of water. Oh, I get it.
Yeah.
And that just feels very simple. So I was just thinking about, what other color and meaning can I apply to this color? And I was thinking about, this cargo ship blue.
Ooh, yeah.
So, maybe it's not just a color of water, but maybe it's about the container ships, cargo ships. So I thought maybe I'll update the color a little bit to the bluer side.
Nice.
So it feels more ambiguous. So like, maybe it's a cargo ship, maybe it's not.
Yeah.
So one way to do that is to literally update the swatch, to the color that I want to see on the page. So I made it into a blue color. So now everything that wherever
nice.
I use that color blue is just automatically updated. So
I like it.
Exactly. And then once again, going back to the gradient, I don't want it to feel so literal. I think that's like something that I always think about, is this too obvious or is it too literal? But sometimes there are answers in the most obvious things, and don't be afraid to do the most obvious thing.
It's true, yeah.
So I'm going to update this color, and I think I was inspired by this sort of magenta purple yesterday.
Totally.
And I'm just like, I don't know how I feel about that anymore. So I'm going to just make a bit more like this. I'm going to make this publication feel a little bit more blue. Just going back to blue.
Yeah.
So
it'll help the pink pop too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm going to make this a little color swatch by eyedrop. Eyedrop's my favorite tool. There's so many tools that I like.
You're like, this is my favorite today.
So I'm actually going to use this blue. I'm going to delete. So when you use the eyedropper, it automatically sort of, picks a color from your monitor. So it's in RGB, and you kind of want to make sure that your color process is in CMYK, because that's, for the print. So
yeah, always going back.
So I'm going to update
Maybe in the future there'll be a eyedropper that can detect RGB versus CMYK depending on your document. Yeah.
And I was like, I do this all the time.
Consider that, Adobe. New update coming soon. Ah, smart eyedropper. That's right. You heard it here first.
So I'm going to add more. I think I'm going to sort of go ahead and maybe keep this publication sort of, 2 fonts. So
got it.
Planted and Neuhaus Grotesque. And I'm curious, if there are any like serifs that you like that you think will sort of benefit from me using, let me know.
Oh yeah, chat, chime in.
Yeah.
Favorite serifs, but in context of this editorial.
This editorial. Exactly.
Makes it a little harder.
Yeah.
They're like,
and I'm going to, sort of like kerning is a big thing when you're choosing fonts as well. And some fonts just have naturally just are better kerned.
Completely.
And
their
you just
spacing is like perfect.
Exactly.
That's a good font.
So you want to pay attention to that. And, maybe it's just such an old font that the kerning is just not well sort of worked out. Then sometimes what I like to do is just set that into an optical kerning sort of style. So the Adobe sort of automatically kerns it for you.
Nice.
So yeah, I think this is going to be my pull-out quote style.
Nice.
Yeah.
Keen said c'est bon.
Yeah.
So I think that you mentioned that yesterday as one of your favorites.
I did mention that. So,
this looks good.
Yeah, I'm going to maybe make all the pull-out quotes italic planted. So I'm gonna go ahead and make a paragraph style.
Yeah, I'm excited to see everybody's posters. I hope you guys are getting them in an almost finished spot so you can submit. Pretty cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, who's working on a poster out there? I know Keen is.
Yeah, and it's funny, I used to have the biggest, what we call it, sort of biggest phobia, like poster phobia.
It's so funny.
I think the reason why was that like I just didn't want to make everything scream on the page.
Yeah.
And and then you sometimes have to think about the viewing distance. So meaning that how is your work going to be viewed? So if you're going to view this book in a really far, like really, sort of far away, you want to make sure that you're making big moves, bold moves to make sure from far you're still able to read that. At places like a book, you don't have to think about, viewing distance as much. Everything is right there in front of you. So you don't have to make everything shout. You don't have to make everything bold. But you still want to print everything out and make sure that it feels pretty, nice and feels really balanced on the page. So,
totally.
That's like, you really have to think about the viewing distance. And that's, I think, something that I like to hear when you're designing this poster, like you're thinking maybe, oh, I thought this poster could be at a bus station, or I wanted this poster to be viewed from a billboard, and I would love to sort of hear about the context as to where the poster is going to be viewed.
Well, this is good because we've got Lindsay working on a poster, and Chelsea, and Ashi, and Fanny. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
And Peng said goodbye. Had to go.
Sorry, bye.
See you soon.
Very nice. So, yeah, I'm just going to make all the pull-out quotes italics and apply this nice little pink.
Cool.
And I think we're almost there in terms of like cleaning up and looking at details. Like, oh, there's my little widow here. So I'm going to force break. I know, everyone's like just watching me typeset.
No, it's great.
It's all the sort of same process, but I'm going to go ahead and apply the optical margin, make sure everything falls outside the text box. It feels tedious, but it feels, I'm sure you'll feel so like awarded once it's all done.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I wanted to show like nitty-gritty, all the details that I always think about. Because, it's not just, editorial design is not just about layout and, making stuff like just feel balanced on the page. And a huge part of it is sort of like typesetting. So I definitely wanted to show that part of the process too today and tomorrow, and just make sure like, what do I look for when I, typeset, and especially things like numbers. You want to make sure all the numbers are current properly, things like that.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and make this our, I think we already have italics going on. So that's something that I also think about too. How many different styles am I using, and am I sort of applying enough logic to them?
You're like, I gotta go back and look. You're like, where's this logic? I like it.
Exactly. So yeah, that's sort of like our title page.
Cool.
And I was thinking what would be fun, and I was inspired by the way the vertical text is applied on these sort of like containers. And I thought like that's a fun way to like do either the cover or sort of maybe the table of contents. So I think I want to bring sort of like even more sort of styles and sort of families of fonts later. So
nice.
I
I'm excited.
So I think I'm going to bring in a little bit of something what we call like monospace typeface. Meaning monospace, so basically different letters have different word spacing and letter spacing.
Yep.
But monospace meaning every letter and every space has the exact same space relationship. So that sort of feels computery. It feels very sort of what you see here. It feels very sort of industrial. So I'm going to go ahead and bring one of these mono headline in for my page numbers and sort of the cover page later on and the title pages.
Yeah. Hi, Yasin. Welcome.
So there we go. I'm downloading the fonts right now from the server. There we go.
Woohoo.
Yeah, so the vertical font is not something I do that much, unless it's like set in a different language like Chinese or Japanese. Oh, sorry, I mean Japanese, not Chinese. But definitely I'm going to set my page number in this monospace font. So I'm going to create a little text box for my page numbers.
Cool. I'm excited about this.
Yay. And it sort of gives a proper book feeling. Like, oh yeah, there's my book with the page numbers.
You're like, there it is.
So page numbers, usually I think there's a shortcut, which
Hi, Sebastian.
can't remember. Oh, there we go.
Nice.
So I'm going to put this page number not in this gradient.
You're like, not like this, but new type. Yeah.
It's happening.
You're like, it's definitely happening. It's all happening.
Yeah, so it's definitely fun to think about. Sometimes people just like to use the fonts that you use in the body text. So, all the captions and all the title page headers and all the page numbers are all the same font. Or maybe they're not. And I think that's the way I like to just think about what makes the most sense. So right now I'm going to...
Logic. I like that.
Exactly.
And we're back to logic. Like, what makes sense here? And how are we going to make that work?
Sometimes I like to sort of set the page numbers like outside the text box, so it doesn't feel like part of the body text. So, and also I'm a big fan of putting it towards the outer margin.
Ooh.
And thinking about how, just think about how people are going to flip through the book and look for page numbers. So I'm going to put it outside the margin here on the right aligned. I'm going to copy paste and place the same thing over here. Okay.
Nice.
I know. All the details, guys.
The details are the most important part.
All the details.
It makes it all sing together.
And I'm going to put align to margins and make sure my page numbers are aligned to the margins that I set up.
Eric is asking if you read Japanese.
No, I don't. I did study it. But
that's hard enough.
Yeah, that was really, really tough. And I also studied Thai alphabets a little bit, but that was probably the most difficult alphabets to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very, very,
very challenging.
Very challenging,
yeah.
Especially if it's not your mother tongue. It's very challenging. So I'm just noticing that all my pull-out quotes are too close to the page numbers. So I'm going to move shift things around the page. How's it looking, guys?
It's cool, yeah, guys. I'm like, this is exciting, the play-by-play of this and that and all the things coming together. Yeah, let us know, guys. Come on, chat, tell us what you think. Let's go.
Exactly. Dun, dun, dun.
Craig was doing that earlier, so, you know.
That's awesome. Yeah. Oh, yesterday I was working on this like texture animation.
Oh, yeah?
So I'm going to go ahead. I forgot about that. I definitely wanted to animate a tide moving in and out of the pages.
Ooh.
So that's what I'm going to do today. So here it is. My strip was going from one side to the other.
Oh, right, yeah.
So
That
really
was
want to
fun.
sort of make these waves sort of sing and move in and out of the pages.
Oh,
So
I love that.
I'm going to apply all this tide animation.
I like the idea that you're talking about it as animation because I think right now people think of it only as a digital aspect in movement, but original animation was flipbook, you know?
Exactly.
And it started as cell drawing so that you could see it in process.
Exactly.
So I love the idea that you're bringing in something that was in fact very like rudimentary and then went way cool and like heavy process and then bringing it back. So
Yeah.
it's nice to see that in the design.
Thank you. And I think maybe it's just like a personal thing. I just love those flip books. And there's such a nice feeling like making something move, make something, you know, dance. And I just sort of make sure that there's an element of that happening, especially for a theme like, you know, port cities. It's just constant flux of things, you know, being exchanged and, you know, things are in conversation with each other. And I want to bring that sort of to life.
Nice.
So I'm going to make this a quiet little wave over here.
Like it's a quiet wave.
It's a quiet wave.
It's a wee wave.
I'm going to apply this over here. And then in this case, I will make sure I, you know, ask the photographer, this is going to overlap on top of your image.
I love the respect. Yes.
And are you okay with that?
Asim says it looks good. Thank you, Asim.
Thank you.
I'm just going to take credit for that. I'm like, thank you. Yeah, I was sitting here the whole time.
I know. She's a great mental support, guys. She's amazing. So I'm going to go ahead and like play this animation.
Oh, I love
See
it.
what
Yeah.
happens. I might need more. There we go.
Ooh, yeah.
Things happening. It's like a loading bar.
Yeah, totally.
You know, and that's one of my favorite things to look out for on a website too, how things load and what's the animation for that.
Completely.
Yeah, somehow I'm finding myself in this beautiful animation world. Like, oh, apparently I like things that move.
Carly says, so cool. Love the flipbook animation idea.
Yay. So I'm going to apply, and obviously, you know, it could be any shape, you know, I can use a pen tool to like mask something, you know, it can be any fluid shapes, but I just kind of, especially this book is so like gritty, and I want to respect that grid I set up, you know, spent so long to set up, so I'm going to go ahead with the flipbook animation.
Nice. You guys have about 7 minutes until the challenge deadline is reached, so I hope you guys are submitting. I'm excited to see all the poster designs.
That went so quickly.
I know, right? It always does, especially near the end.
Absolutely. So I'm going to play my animation. I'm going to refine my flipbook animation, my tide animation, and then going to sort of play it. Make sure that, you know, everything plays well. So yeah, this is my process, guys.
This is cool. Paul's like, yeah, that's great.
And obviously the bitmap texture is like really fun to play with. So I sometimes, you know, think about bitmap is a great way to sort of save ink. So it just means that you're printing, instead of flooding this whole area with ink, when you bitmap it, you're just printing that image with dots. Totally. So I sometimes like to think about, do I want to apply some sort of texture to the image, and what does that mean? You know, it's a really sort of a good way to think about when it comes to sort of like things feeling balanced on the page, or like there's enough sort of movement and dynamic, sort of action going on the page. So that's sort of
nice
things that always go through my head. Yeah,
there's a lot to think about in editorial design. It's very complex. There's a lot of moving parts.
Absolutely, and that's the beauty too. And you know, often I just love to sort of give enough time so that the idea gets better. Maybe the idea grows, and maybe the idea sort of develops over time, and that's all part of the process. And you know, that's something that I always mention it to my friends or people, my students, is that you really sort of want to sort of go with your gut feeling sometimes and listen to yourself. And that's sort of the biggest sort of training that you could do, is that you do something and you really think about, why am I doing this? Does it feel right? And sometimes it's easy to listen to other people and sort of do what other people think feels right. But, remember that this is your process and your sort of baby, and you want to, sort of do the things that sort of feels good to you. And, don't be afraid to listen to your instincts, basically.
Yeah, I think it's great advice, especially for young designers and designers that are seeing a lot more work online now. To remember to stick to their intuition.
Absolutely. And that I couldn't emphasize that enough. And, you can apply all kinds of theory and, rules to it. The headline has to be a certain size with certain leading. But maybe with that font you're using, it feels good to break out of that. And, it's always good to listen to yourself. And that's my biggest advice.
Nice. I like that. Oh man, the time is going down. I hope you guys are submitting and getting your submissions ready. It's definitely, the clock is ticking.
Ooh.
The intensity is on.
Yeah. I mean, I love seeing what everyone's been working on.
Yeah, I know,
I'm the
right?
one just talking.
No, you're working on stuff too. I'm the one that's talking.
I love it.
Yes, as Adobe Live says, don't stress. You can always submit a poster in one of the later streams. You have the ability to submit all day today until 4:30. So, pretty cool.
Yeah, I love this feeling of like submerging. So I don't know if you just saw that. I was just playing things, just kind of submerging.
It's really
underwater.
nice to see it play. It really comes to life.
So I'm going to go ahead and finish this small animation.
I love it.
Yay. And don't be afraid to leave a lot of sort of white space. And don't be afraid of the white space, basically. Like, you don't have to fill the whole space with something. And, that's something that I always embrace. Like, does this image need white space? Or does the image need more sort of fill space? And that's always something that I always try to add more, and then I always pull back. And that's the part of the editing process that I was talking about. So yeah, I might just go ahead and place a little bit more images. I just realized also there's a narrative going on with my images, and the story hasn't ended yet.
I know, I love it. I'm like, oh, we just have a meal here. I'm like, we're obviously on our way to the dining room, so.
Exactly, it's like, what's gonna happen next? So after the dining room, what should we do? Maybe you sort of have a little, you go for a little...
Go for a little stroll.
Stroll.
Walk off the meal.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm going to stroll around the boat, walk off the meal, see the sights.
Yeah. And I love that. So a bit of night sky.
Yeah.
And you see the whole context. And I might make this sort of really big.
Ooh, love it. Yeah.
It just feels like, ta-da, that's our climax. It's at the high point of our spread is here.
Yeah.
Absolutely fun to think about, So here's a lot going on. There's an animation of the tides going on.
Totally.
And there's a, sort of storytelling with the images going on. And then there's also the interviews, and there's a lot of things just sort of coming together, and I'm really excited.
You're like, the story's coming together, you guys. Can you see it? It's so great.
I'm curious how I should end this. I haven't thought about how to end this book. I thought about maybe ending with like a nighttime, like the end, like the dark sky, and then that's the end of the book. Or I don't know, maybe it's nice to end with an emptiness. I don't know how, if what you guys think I should end this
Yeah,
little
guys,
booklet.
what do you think, chat? Do you think that how should it end?
Yeah.
Big photography,
Yeah, or
small photography, no photography?
yeah, or maybe it's texture.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a nice ending, and that's coming back to this idea of sequencing your book. I like to think about it
Oh, they said
as
emptiness. Or end with the
Emptiness.
pink blue water pick with the bitmap wave. Oh, yeah, that was very
There you
specific,
go.
Roxanne. She's been following along.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice.
She likes that pink blue water image. Yeah.
Everyone wants
Go
to see
big.
that. Go big.
Fading ending.
Ooh, fading and
Yeah. Oh, I like this.
All right, I'm gonna get some
Go
images
colorful.
phase.
Oh, guys, that's it. We've hit the deadline.
Ooh.
Oh, man.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Time's
So
up.
we'll give a couple seconds here to let everything trickle in. I know that always kind of happens where things are still in submission.
Awesome. I'm excited.
Yeah, I know. I'm ready to see some too. This is great. Yeah, thanks for submitting, everyone.
Yay. Yeah, I'm gonna carry on. Yeah.
So let's see. I think these are just they're rolling in right now.
All right.
Nice. All right. I think we're ready. Let's,
All right.
let me just put some on my screen. Go to. All right. So the first one is Jacob Fremderman. Fremderman. I tried. It was more like Friendman, but Jacob Fremderman. So Sababa.
Thanks for submitting.
Yeah, it says Hebrew, which is really cool, wicked awesome. And Arabic is passionate love. Huh.
Wow. So this is a poster. So, I'm going to assume that this is a sort of like a gigantic sort of print. So I like that you're giving a bit of hint, sort of there's always sort of like a clue or a little caption that explains what's going on the page, which I think is happening at the bottom. And I want to make sure that that sort of caption or that clue as to explaining what's happening on the page is not too revealing. So when you think about a gigantic poster, you're essentially sort of filling that poster with big type. So I wish that type was a lot smaller. So giving sort of like the big graphic at the top a little bit more emphasis. And then you don't have to feel like you have to explain everything or dumb down anything. You have to sort of, just maybe hide something, and that's I think that's some, you can have a lot of fun with that, sort of by hiding and revealing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you can play with the scale a lot more, and just think about how it's going to read or how small or big it's going to feel when you print this out.
Totally. I think that's great. Nice job, Jacob.
Nice job.
Fremderman. All right. Robbie Valdez.
All right, Rotiva. Once again, just going back to this idea of how something feels on the page. Everything just feels very big. So I think, once again, the design, Louisville, the location tag could be a lot smaller. And I think you can sort of play with this sort of idea of making something feel balanced. So, I can imagine the Rotiva, the big graphic sort of top left aligned. And then I can see the small type sort of towards the sort of the other part of the page, and sort of like making sure everything feels balanced on that page. So I think you can sort of play around with the scale once again, and then sort of placement of elements to make sure things just doesn't feel like it's about to tip over to one side.
Yeah, it's fun having it be very retro and kind of, it's almost more 90s than 80s, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and I really
It's like
love
Saved by the Bell. I like it. Yeah.
I love the gradient that comes through that.
Yeah.
Oh, the geometric O.
Yeah,
I
right?
love that.
Yeah, really fun. Nice job, Robbie. All right. Fanny Esquivel.
Oh.
Oh, a poster for Amulet.
All right. I like
Beautiful.
that. Oh, is it a real company? I don't know. But I like that you're thinking about, the image and type relationship. And it's a great idea to, sort of place something in the center so it doesn't get sort of lost towards the end of the paper. So, and I think that's a great move. And so the image feels very like nice and big on the page. And I think there's a drop shadow going on. And I wonder if that's really distracting.
I think it's two fonts layered over each other. You can see it better here.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It might be too much.
Yeah, I think I might want to sort of, once again, go through this editing process in your head and see, if you can sort of simplify a lot of stuff on your page. But yeah, I like how it feels balanced on the page.
Yeah, no, it's nice. I think the emphasis up top, like Sunny said, is good. Maybe de-emphasizing the type on the bottom so that the image is really popping.
Exactly.
Nice. Good job, Fanny. All right, Chelsea Skinner is up next.
Ooh, you mocked it
Oh,
up.
and in context.
Thank
Yeah,
you for
let's see if
showing
I
the
can-
context.
Yeah. Check that out.
I love. Okay, Red Wings.
Red Wings Airlines.
Interesting.
Cool.
I really like the sort of how tranquil and clean it feels on the page.
Yeah.
I don't know if the Red Wings is, you're treating as a logo or if it's treated as a headline. What do you
Yeah,
think?
it
Do you think
seems
it's
like
a logo?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Name for the logo. Yeah.
Yeah, and I like the red, how the red is, in contrast to that blue. I love the way it pops.
Yeah.
And I love that you're sort of like emphasizing, hi, Marta.
Hi, Marta. Marta's here.
And I love that you're sort of using color, really intentionally to highlight the, sort of parts of the paper that you want people to look at.
Yeah, it's great. It's really minimal. And it definitely makes the logo and the brand and the tail of the plane stand out. So it's nicely done.
I would happily go on that airline.
Totally. And I also like this context image. It feels real. So it's kind of cool to know that it might be a real image.
Yeah, absolutely. I can sort of see it as a billboard and sort of like blending into the sky.
Yeah.
That would be really cool.
Yeah. Nice job, Chelsea.
Nice job.
All right. Ashi Yunus. Hi, Ashi.
Oh, it's Palma. I recognize this
Oh,
from
yeah.
yesterday.
Yesterday there was a Palma business card. Yeah, this is like the whole suite.
Yeah, I love
I like the transition into day 2 challenge.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that you're thinking of it as a series. And I
Totally.
think that's something I really love doing. Just kind of like, how does this thing live as a poster? How does this thing live as a business card? And I think just thinking about the whole sort of breadth of the whole suite is something that I think it's really interesting to think about as a designer. And
Totally.
think about, maybe, you want to be a little bit more ambiguous in certain things. Maybe on a business card, you want to be a little bit more ambiguous. But then on a poster, you want to like reveal everything.
Yeah.
So that's something that is really interesting to think about. And I like that, she took it as a series of work.
Yep.
In terms of this poster, I think it's sort of very minimal. I mean, to be honest, like I didn't realize it was of candles. When you see the image, it sort of feels very tropical. It feels very much like, maybe because I just looked at an airline's poster. I feel like it's sort of like a holiday magazine or something that feels a little bit more like editorial. And it doesn't sort of communicate to me that it's about candles. So I would sort of think about using either imagery or little icons, or maybe your Palma little symbol is related to the candles. I would just definitely think about multiple levels of reading. When someone sees it for 1 second, what are they going to get out of it? And you want to make sure the first thing you see is the candles. So I would kind of just think about how you can communicate that really immediately. But otherwise, it feels, I love that sort of image in the background and how it's working with that warm yellow. And I love that the logo is in white, so it kind of like pops. And I think overall, I think it's, really sort of in terms of color and composition, it feels balanced. But I would think about, that what's the immediate takeaway?
Yeah, no, I agree. I love the image use. I think that it feels like it's like gonna smell, or maybe it has like an aroma to it because of the natural water on the leaves. So maybe an image that represents the actual fragrance of the candle, if not palm.
Yeah.
Cool, nice job, Ashi. All right, Kian Yi, I think this is the last one.
Oh, Stanley Kubrick film Monster.
Ooh.
It's coming out this summer 2019.
Stanley Kubrick's back. I am so excited. Resurrection. Maybe he is the monster in this film.
Oh, wow.
And that's what we're going to see. Yes, up from the dead. I like this.
I love that there's like a big sort of punchy boldness to the way you're using type and the way you're using color. And I love the texture coming through. It feels very vintagey, but it feels kind of very modern.
Yeah.
I love the way the O is tilted, and there's something's slightly off and something's about to happen. There's a very sort of interesting mood going on with everything working. I enjoy the contrast in everything that you're bringing to the page.
Yeah, I like the slight Saul Bass references with the partnership with Kubrick, and the fact that O is then also like an eye of a monster that could be enlarged to kind of tease out what that is. And then the little details in the corner where it's the Warner sisters instead of the Warner brothers. And then not legendary production, which is pretty awesome because he's such a legend. So there was a lot of like little thought and detail going into this that I think is really awesome.
Absolutely. Oh, one last thing, and obviously this is a very abstract minimal poster, but I think often you gotta think about what else goes on the poster. Like you wanna maybe put actors' names on it, you have to sort of think about, like abstraction and minimalism is great, but you kind of want to make sure that there's enough content for people
like
to
who's
take
starring?
away. Exactly.
Is it by Stanley, starring Stanley?
I know. I want to know more
I
about
really
this
hope
movie.
so. Yeah, Zombie Stanley coming back.
Yeah, tell me more. Maybe it's a series. So
Totally.
Yeah.
This would be a really fun series.
Yeah. Awesome. Well done.
Amazing job, guys. I think that I'm not sure. I'm gonna refresh just to make sure we didn't miss one. Nope, that was it.
That was it.
Wow, that's a lot of really great submissions, guys. Good job, chat. If you didn't get a chance to submit now, then there's always a chance to submit in the next sessions later today. So Marta will be on later, and she will be also viewing submissions and giving some good feedback with Kathleen. So very excited about this.
Awesome.
All right, so
Thanks,
maybe
guys.
what we'll do is we've got about 15 minutes. We can do a recap and maybe think about the ending that we left off with.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm really sort of, I want you to tell me.
Yeah,
how
you guys,
should I end it?
you're already chatting in there, so let us know. I think the question at the last minute was, what should you do with the last page?
Exactly. It's like a fun way to think about how to end or how to start or how to sort of carry on that narrative. So I think today we talked a lot about, sort of implying or sort of injecting more layer of meaning or layer of, something else on top of what you're doing. And, different, I think also today we talked about different ways of reading, how is this going to be read and what kind of people are going to read this book. So think about, what type of, there's going to be some people just flipping through the book or there'll be some people reading, page by page, and just being a little bit more accommodating to, who your audience is going to be is quite important. And so, I really want to sort of go ahead and make, for flipper like you, I want to make sure.
I'm a flipper. I'm like...
I want to make sure there's like, interesting movement happening. So we're making a little tide, what I call tide animation. So, water is filling in and out of the space. And I think it's going to be quite fun to flip. And I can't wait to like print this book and flip it.
Yeah, totally.
And also we sort of added this extra layer you can't really read it. I might have to adjust the texture. But basically just thinking about using different fonts or different styles or different typefaces to sort of capture different moods or different sort of characteristics of that particular text. So this, the whole session yesterday, I wanted it to feel really anonymous and very quiet and very sort of quiet and serious in the way the voice is sort of being visualized. But I'm going to sort of add sort of this chaotic sort of layout. So like that's a contrast there. So, thinking about...
And Paul actually said, he was like, thanks for that animation tip. He's like, best idea I've never been aware of. I think it's really true to be able to see something that is, it's the unexpected details.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And those are the little things that what I call like aha moments
Yeah.
that everyone enjoys. And what I love about editorial design also is that it's not just about the moment you open the book, but it's also the way that sits in your bookshelf and the way that you revisit that book.
Totally.
So maybe
you can read it once and see something very like specific and then leave it and read it again later and actually notice something new.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's good design.
Yeah. Thanks. So, I'm going, I applied all these images and I'm sort of giving you literally showing you taking you with me on a little trip.
Yeah.
So there's that sort of, narrative going on. So we're taking off this like port city and I'm sort of having breakfast or having dinner and I'm just and then there's a night. So, I'm thinking about time of the day and, using the sequential element of the book to reveal, a sort of a story or reveal a small like animation. So those are the really like multiple layers of things that you can really think about.
Yeah.
And I think today we also think about how to sort of like end this book,
Right?
Usually
we're like, how are we going to end it, guys?
So usually in an editorial design, there will be sort of back matter, meaning there will be some sort of index of, words with like page numbers. So it like towards the end, usually in the back matter, there's really more like functional stuff in there. So maybe that's something that I can maybe I'll gather some content for the back matter. But I like the idea of like ending it really like calmly.
Yeah, I think a couple people in the chat earlier were on the same page.
Yeah.
No pun intended. But they were like, yes, very like serene and calm and just a flood of color.
Right. And also think about when you're applying full bleed images, you're sort of implying that there is more story going on. So, throughout the whole second part of the book, I placed all these like full bleed images and it just feels continuous. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to give an ending to the
great.
To the story.
Nice.
So
well, that's good. I think we have a little bit of time that we can do that, about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So this is perfect.
So I'm just like, where do we end? So there's the night. So maybe that night image becomes the end. Or maybe
You're like, or a sunrise. It's like, and we're back to the next day. That way we can have a whole nother chapter tomorrow.
Exactly. So tomorrow I'm going to work on the cover and then seems like, I think I might have a time for another essay, but I'm going to have to think about that because I think I talked already a lot about refining, sort of the text and design and a lot of details to look out for. But maybe tomorrow I might set another essay and really work the cover.
Oh, I think that'd be fun. Yeah.
Yeah, work the cover and the back matter. I might do table of contents page.
Oh, yeah. Well, you could bring in the idea that you had earlier, which was looking at the more linear type that was on the cargo ship. Yeah.
Exactly.
Pretty cool.
So tomorrow I'm going to really sort of finish the book by thinking about the front matter, back matter, and then the cover.
Awesome.
And then I think I'm going to really sort of bring Photoshop into it and sort of like liquidify some sections of the book. So
That sounds good.
stay tuned.
I think chat also wants to see more essay and cover, so they're very excited about both.
Cool. That's good to know. So I'll bring
Yeah.
more essays in for you guys.
You're like, why not?
Yeah,
You do
I'm
a little
like-
bit of both.
Oh, I just realized I want this ship to land. So
Yes.
that's it. I think that's our last image.
You're like, it's coming full circle. This ship's gotta land.
Exactly. And obviously there's a bit more interview content that I can set, but I think, I'm not gonna do that right now. I'm just gonna sort of think about bigger pictures of where everything lands and how I'm going to end the book. So I think what was the sort of consensus as to how to
consensus
end?
on ending the book. I guess, what are their options? It's always
Very,
good to give options.
Yeah, I think options. Very quiet ending.
Yeah,
so
quiet ending, which would be like blank.
You land.
New
and
land.
You land
yes.
and you go.
Oh, these are the options. Nice. So new land
Yeah.
or gradient.
Yeah,
or...
maybe this is a completely new gradient.
Yeah, totally.
I like that. And then the back cover, obviously the back cover sort of, has to, well, not has to, but I like to think of the front cover and the back cover as a little sort of like a landscape image.
Yeah.
So maybe tomorrow I'll show you how to sort of maybe set up a cover artwork.
Richard just said, wow. I don't know if that's an answer, but I like it. And Asim said gradient. So they're starting to chime in right now. There's always a little bit of a lag.
Yeah. And I like to think about as a sort of like a cycle too. So like, maybe you finished the book, but maybe you want to go back to the front of the book. So I always think about how to end the book that maybe makes you want to go back to the front.
Totally.
So yeah, I think gradient
It's
just feels
continuous,
so-
because then it's just a constant animation of flipping pages and going through.
Exactly.
It's a circular book. There is no ending.
Oh, it could be a
It could
circular
be, yeah,
book.
right?
You could bind it like with a spiral little
Completely.
plastic thing, and then it could be
Completely.
a little never-ending. I love that. Then it's conceptually it makes sense.
Totally. This water just keeps flowing. Oh, we are just
Absolutely.
so conceptual and meta right now.
I know. I'm just going to like flip through a bit more images and really thinking about, have I missed any other images? And sometimes when I put place images, I ask the editor and the photographer to give me like, their top picks,
Yeah.
and it's good to once again like have that conversation, and it's, it's so subjective too, and maybe it's important that she shows this image. Maybe it's so meaningful
that's
image.
Such a beautiful image.
Yeah, so everyone, that sort of maybe a photographer and, intended this image to be included in the book, and you want to know those kind of things.
It's nice to actually see some of those images that large, because I think it's sometimes hard to see them in the editorial while you're laying them out. So it's really nice being able to see the details, because they are very detailed.
Absolutely. And I'm just thinking that it's nice to end on an image like this. And yeah, I'm gonna sort of take your advice and think about how to end this book tomorrow.
Oh man, this is gonna be good. Well, this is pretty great.
Yeah, so I think these are like all the moves that I can think about.
Yeah, no, maybe what we could do is recap and go through with the black background to show the layout so that everyone can see the progress that was made today.
Alright. So this is a cover that I'm going to work on tomorrow, and I think here, table of contents, or sort of like credits or colophon, a bit more like sort of opening text about what you're about to see.
I always love when Editorial calls it the colophon, like the more formal version of the table of contents.
Exactly.
I'm like, one of my favorite words.
You feel like you know
Yeah,
like a
I'm
lot.
like, ooh, it's a good one.
So this is our feature, one of the essays. So there's one person talking, and it's sort of moving in and out of the page. And I sort of made, these pull-out quotes like consistent, and I'm applying sort of gradient, so it doesn't sort of blend too much into the body text. And then sort of you can see with the animation.
Yeah, the images are really the way that you're treating them, and the kind of flow that they're doing is very interesting, and it feels like what you've set out to do, which is compartmentalized but flowing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's like a beauty of making a grid. You can, be as flexible as you want, or you can be as rigid as you want. So, those are the things that I'm always thinking about, and I'm happy to share that with everyone.
Yeah, amazing.
And I'm just thinking about how this image kind of doesn't feel like a good end.
You're like, it was a good end, like right before we looked, and now we don't like it. Well, we like the image, just maybe not that ending.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, maybe it's going to sit outside my
Christina
grid for
just joined us,
now.
and she's like, it's a pretty blue gradient.
Yay. Yeah, I'm so happy about this blue.
I know. I like the change. It was a really good update.
Yeah.
It was subtle, but necessary, and it changed the whole feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's good to always view. I always love to go from start to finish, like view, like, what we just did, just, flip through everything and make sure that something just feels, right, or maybe there's a detail that you can update. And there's some images that you can like Photoshop, make it bright, So it's all about sort of looking, like zooming in and out. So I constantly look at details, and then I constantly zoom out and then like sort of look at the whole flow.
Yeah, and you had mentioned even taking space from the design, like, what you'll inevitably do tonight.
Yes.
Is take some space away from it so that when you come back the next day or the next time you open up the document, you're able to see things that you didn't see before.
Absolutely.
Nice.
And, it's good to like, have a conversation with friends, maybe like you want to send this to someone that you really trust.
Yeah,
and,
chat. Who should she send it to? Well, no, this is great. Well, as you guys have gotten to see, Sunny's work today really progress into something quite lovely and interesting and fun with the animation. Tomorrow we're going to be looking at more of that, and Sunny will focus on the cover designs as well as the colophon, and possibly even another essay if you guys are lucky.
Yeah, we'll see.
So get excited. We'll be back here tomorrow, same time, same place, and Marta and Kathleen are up next. So stay tuned. It's going to be great editorial.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.